So today's story from our book that we've been reading, Callings, is about a person named Carl McNair, who's 57, who is talking about his brother, Ronald. So I'm just going to read the whole story to you, and you can pause it and rewind. And then after I finish reading it, I would like you to individually read the story. And then on page 108 in your binder, create a Google document and complete the 7 parts of the assignment, and then submit that document through Google Classroom. On page 108, that's the same homework assignments that you've had since classes started, and we tend to discuss some of those items as we read the story. So I'm going to begin. Carl McNair, 57, remembers his brother, astronaut Ronald McNair, with his friend Vernon Skipper, 57. Ronald McNair lost his life on January 28, 1986, when the NASA Challenger space shuttle exploded just seconds after liftoff, killing him and the rest of the crew. We knew from an early age that my brother Ron was different. When he was 9 years old, Ron decided to take a mile walk from our home down to the library, which was, of course, a public library, but not so public for black folks when you're talking about 1959 in segregated South Carolina. So as he was walking through the library, all these folks were staring at him because it was white folk only, and they were looking at him and saying, "You know, who is this Negro?" He found some books and he politely positioned himself in line to check out. Well, this old librarian says, "This library is not for coloreds." He said, "I would like to check out these books." She says, "Young man, if you don't leave this library right now, I'm going to call the police." He just propped himself up on the counter and sat there and said, "I'll wait." So she called the police and subsequently called my mother. The police came down, 2 burly guys, and say, "Well, where's the disturbance?" She pointed to the 9-year-old boy sitting up on the counter. One of the policemen says, "Ma'am, what's the problem?" So my mother, in the meanwhile, she comes down there and she's praying the whole way, "Lordy, Jesus, please don't let them put my child in jail." My mother asked the librarian, "What's the problem?" The librarian said, "He wanted to check out the books. You know that your son shouldn't be down here." The police officer said, "Why don't you just give the kid the books?" And my mother said, "He'll take good care of them." Reluctantly, the librarian gave Ron the books, and my mother said, "What do you say?" He said, "Thank you, ma'am." Ron did exceptionally well at school, and he was very good in science and math. During his junior year in high school, his chemistry professor told him about a summer institute for math and science. So he went 300 miles or so from home to participate in this program. He met a professor there who said, "The highest academic level you can go is PhD, and young man, I think you should shoot for it." And Ron says, "That sounds like a pretty good idea, sir. I'll get a PhD." And he went on to get a PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Then, when NASA was looking for astronauts, here he was with a PhD in physics. Ron went on a space flight in February of 1984. When he went out in space and he looked out at the world, he saw no lines of demarcation. It was a world of peace, he said, and 2 years later, he took his last flight on the Space Shuttle Challenger. You know, as youngsters, a show came on TV called Star Trek. Now, Star Trek showed the future, where there were black folk and white folk, all kinds of folk, working together. I looked at it as science fiction. That wasn't going to happen, really, but Ronald saw it as science possibility. He was always someone who didn't accept societal norms as being his norm. That was for other people. In Ron's own words, he was the kind of person who hung it over the edge. He'd go as far as he could, then go one step beyond that. Ron was a country boy from segregated small town South Carolina. Who would dream that he would become an astronaut? But it was his time, and he got to be aboard his own Starship Enterprise. Recorded in Atlanta, Georgia on March 18, 2007. The library in Lake City, South Carolina was renamed the Dr. Ronald E. McNair Life History Center on January 28, 2011, 25 years after Ron's death.